Welcome to Sustainable Development Goals 101. What are the SDGs all about? We are delighted to bring to you today an incredible panel of people who've been involved in the goals, not only in their creation, but actually in helping to fulfill them. So I'm going to introduce, without further ado, Kate Garvey, the co-founder of Project Everyone, Stuart McLaughlin, Executive Engagement at Google.org, Annemarie Hou, Executive Director of the UN Office for Partnerships. And my name is Edie Lush, and I'm the co-host of the Global GoalsCast, which is part of the We Are All Human Foundation. So let's kick off straight away. Annemarie, first of all, tell me, what is sustainable development and what are the Sustainable Development Goals?
So for me, I really think about sustainable development as a way for us to get to peace, dignity, equality on a healthy planet. And sustainable development are all the pieces of that puzzle that will get us to that equality, the dignity, the peace that we're looking for. Economic development that is really taking climate action, that is really not depleting any of our natural resources, that is inclusive, that brings everyone together. And we have 17 goals. And these goals cover everything from poverty to zero hunger. And they really look at all of those basic needs that everyone needs in order to be able to have a world of peace, dignity, and equality for all on a healthy
So it's really interesting that there's 17. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more. In fact, Kate, let's bring you in because you were there at the creation of the goals. Why are there 17? Why do they have different colors? What's the order about? Tell me.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so it was actually 6 years ago, 2014, at the end of the first set of goals, the Millennium Development Goals. And I think Annemarie can talk a bit more about that transition period. But I had previously worked on the Millennium Development Goals, but was somewhat frustrated with my co-founder, Richard Curtis, the film director, that they weren't well known enough. And so with the now Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, we came up with a plan that this time round with the new set of goals, we would try and make them famous, because you can't fight for your rights unless you know what they are. And so we thought, first of all, when we were presented with 17, that's an unusual number. That's not a symmetrical number. This might be challenging. We need to go bright and colorful. And so we worked with a great designer. And after months of back and forth between the UN and this creative team, we came up with, I've rather strangely placed it, this badge, which I hope everyone receives one of these, and a colorful way of coding each of the goals so that each goal had its own color, its own number, its own icon. And within that, you could delve into the targets behind them. We felt it was important that everyone should know about the goals. That's why we're called Project Everyone. We wanted to get the goals to every single person on the planet. We failed, by the way. It's still a big job to be done. But we reached about 3 billion people in that first year with the help of Beyonce and the UN's huge reach. So it was an extraordinary time.
So Annemarie, I'll come back to you. Tell us why the order is important. Why is there was some unfinished business from the Millennium Development Goals? Is that why we've got hunger, poverty up at the start?
That's exactly it. It's really a continuation. Back in 2000, when the Millennium Development Goals were created, they were very much a snapshot of some of the top issues of our time. And there was a lot of progress, particularly around poverty, around health, but they weren't completed. There was still so much to do. And so that's why when you look at the goals in the first couple, start off with the continuation of the Millennium Development Goals to recognize the progress, but also to see that there's still a gap, and that's what we really need to work on. And I think 17 it could have easily have been a different number. But at some point it was decided, and that's what's so great, is it was such a massive consultative process that everyone had a voice. Truly everyone could say what was really important to them, what was really interconnected, what do we need that goes with education, that goes with energy, that goes with life underwater. So the fact that it was a big consultative process that brought together all of these leaders who all said yes to them. And so really, truly, as Kate was saying, this is everyone's goals. This is the global goals. They're not just the UN, they are for everyone.
We like to say on the podcast that it's like the measuring stick that you as an individual can hold up to your government, to the company that you work for, because in fact, we've had most countries in the world sign up to say that they want to achieve these goals by 2030. We know that we're falling behind on quite a few of them, so we may come to that in a moment. But tell me, Stuart, why has Google.org gotten involved in the goals? Why do you feel that it's something that for Google is really important?
Yeah, thanks, Edie. And hello, folks. Yeah, I think from our perspective, just kind of following up from the comments that Annemarie and Kate made there, that one of both the sort of blessings and the curses of the goals is they are so extraordinarily all-encompassing. You know, if you're going to address every aspect in society and in life, you know, the very feat of boiling that down to 17 is quite something. You know, and for organizations, I think your ability to communicate work effectively and clearly, and actually whether that organization is the UN or it's Google or it's Project Everyone, is fundamentally important. So I suppose from a Google.org and Google perspective, just the ability to frame your work in a context that is relatable for communities, for citizens, for civic society is vital to make it relevant to them. You know, when I think about, if you think about certainly as we do, I often joke when I'm speaking to colleagues at the UN, between the spaghetti of everything that Google does and the spaghetti of everything that the UN does, navigating that path is virtually impossible. And actually that framework, you know, it's often called a blueprint, and we think of it as a sort of blueprint for solutions and a roadmap for solutions to tackle those problems. And so for us, a lot of that value is in the context setting and making sure that the work that we do is relevant and aligns with an overall objective.
So do you feel like the goals, when you start to work on one issue, you can see how they're connected to another? I mean, just to give an example, when we talk about the importance of climate change and trying to address climate change, what's really interesting in the podcast is that the stories quite very quickly get into issues around equity, get into issues around inequality, get into issues around women's rights, educating girls, and you wouldn't always put climate with, for example, educating girls. So I wonder, Stuart, just tell me a little more about how you see those intersections, because you scratch the surface of the goals and you see that they're all connected.
Yeah, I mean, it's very true. It's funny you should mention this, in that I've just in the last few days been discussing work with UN Women in relation to generation equality, the work that will mark the 25th, in fact, actually the 26th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration after it was postponed from this year due to COVID. And one of the things we've just been talking about is this: as soon as you deal with the top line issue around gender equality, you don't even scratch the surface before you find that intersectionality. And I think, you know, again, that's very true of a lot of the work that we do. So again, I would sort of bring it back to saying, you know, having to understanding that there is a framework and there is a lead message, and just stick on that example of around gender equality. Some work that we've just done in the US with the National Domestic Workers Alliance is sort of typifies that, which is really a project around direct cash support for those impacted by COVID who are members of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. But then you very quickly get into issues relating to gender, in relation to race, and the disproportionate impact to those communities. So again, framing it at the top level in relation to the core issue that you're trying to address, but then understanding that intersectionality in itself is again vital, because, you know, COVID, of course, you know, we can't have anything at the moment without talking about it in this context. Is, you know, it's the Gates Foundation, Melinda Gates, I think, is sort of, you know, very oft repeated already. You know, 25 years of progress has been you know, wiped out to some extent. Is that we've started to see that making progress collectively on these issues is more urgent than ever, and it's shone a light on disparity that many of us in our work would already have known about, but the broader awareness of that is vital in terms of tackling the issues and making more progress.
So, Kate, let's come to you. In fact, you're raising your hand, which is great. I'd love you to respond to that. And also tell me a little more about that video we saw just before the session started.
Yeah, sure. Well, and actually, that's a great segue in, because what I wanted to say was, I think COVID absolutely, as Stuart has pointed out, has set the goals back. There's no doubt about that. But what I think we're finding is, as this session is showing, is that within the goals, they do hold the answer. They hold the solutions to how we're going to build back in the most green, sustainable, equitable way. And I think it's fantastic that 193 countries 5 years ago agreed to this plan, because what they really need to do, from the political level to the business level to individual and community level, is to look back at the plan and say, here is the solutions to how we are going to solve this. And remember, there's a deadline with the goals. It's 2030. So we've got 10 years, we've got a decade of action that we need to really all play our part in. And I think that's what's so great about them. They're universal. They're interconnected, as you've talked about. So it's not just about global North supporting global South. It's about what happens in your home as well as overseas. They are interconnected, as we've discussed, and there is a deadline. And I think those things make it a brilliant rallying cry now more than ever as to how we're going to solve the problems we face as it is. And that was the reason why this group got together, led by the United Nations, to say in September 2020, how can we set that out to the world in a communicable way? And we agreed upon an idea called Nations United. Remember, 193 countries signed up, so every country has a role to play here. Nations United sets out the facts as they are now, and they're not great in not all places, but in many places. And then the solutions by which we can solve poverty, inequality, justice, climate change, and gender, and particularly the gender issue. And it's only 34 minutes, and it involves some of the biggest stars that support these issues, from Michelle Yeoh to Beyonce. Again, she's has an amazing performance at the end, and Tandy Newton, Malala, the Deputy Secretary General, the Secretary General themselves, all set out what we need to do to solve this. And I would love everyone to watch it if they haven't already. I'd love everyone to share it with their communities, well, with their employees. It's a great rallying cry, and it's only 34 minutes.
So that's a good call to action there. Annemarie, let's come back to you and tell me a little bit about what the danger is if we don't achieve the goals. How much are they going to cost? We know that we're facing the largest recession in 150 years. There's always gloom and doom, but give me a little reality check in terms of why it's so important.
I think we've already started to see why they're so important. If we had gotten a little bit further along on the Sustainable Development Goals, we would have been a little more resilient and shock-proof to some of these crises that come, such as COVID. I think what COVID has really done is open our eyes to the inequalities. I think sometimes people may have thought that, okay, the Sustainable Development Goals are really for, this part of the world. What we've really seen is that inequality exists in every part of the world. And if anything, COVID has really shown that light on where those disparities are, where our systems are weak, where people are not getting access or being left behind. And that is the danger. It's so real. We can see it right now, what's happening. And that's why this whole acceleration is really needed. It's this fantastic blueprint. And what we really need to think about is how we scale up. Someone was just telling me that, for example, the vaccine for COVID, we want to make sure that everyone everywhere gets it at the same time, that there isn't a lag in access anywhere in the world. And there is currently a deficit of a gap of $28 billion, which sounds like a lot of money. But $28 billion is less than 2 days that we lose right now during COVID in tourism dollars. So really, it is a fantastic investment. The SDGs are all about investing in the current generation. It's also about investing in the future generation and making sure that we are not handing the next generation a very big debt. and or a planet that's not in any way be able to be changed at some point. Time is ticking away, as Kate said, and every real moment does count, and we don't have that much time to get to where we need to be before the next shock comes.
So I think this decade of action that we talk about, the golden decade, as I've heard it referred to, needs to be a decade of real action. So Stuart, let's come back to you. Tell me a little more about how, if I'm an individual thinking about, okay, so I see these goals, there's really nothing I disagree with here, but how can I go about implementing them into my everyday life?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and Edie, and I'm gonna hand off very quickly, probably to Kate on this, actually, because I think there is. I'll give one sort of example. Is that one thing that we've wrestled with often in our discussions is around the importance of individual action. So, of course, it is vital that organisations like Google and lots of our peers around September time made commitments to net zero, to move to a position of carbon carbon neutrality, and to exclusively by 2030 to exclusively be using renewable sources of energy and not simply offsetting, as previous definitions have been. And those actions are important, but the role of individual actions is critical as well. I mean, I think right now, one of the, again, weird things about COVID is we often wrestle with this idea, but it's actually all about individual action at the moment. The way that we, whether we wear a mask or whether we wash our hands or how we behave is the thing that will literally save lives. And so we can see some of that. So one of the things that we've done in Google and worked very closely with the UN and the WHO especially is to make sure that we're an information platform, and there are dedicated sites, COVID sites on Google.com globally, which provide information that is being validated by the WHO. The data is all up to date, sort of sourced from Wikipedia and authoritative sources of information, tackling misinformation and so on. That is all vital, and that's the part that we've done. But actually, longer term, that role of individual action is going to become increasingly important. And COVID is a great example of how individuals can impact change, but I think we still have a long way to go on that. And again, I know this is an area that Kate and Annemarie and the UN are thinking about a lot, and are sort of starting to put our minds to.
So Kate, let's come to you. Tell me about individual action. What are the things that people can go away and start to do if they do care? And you can start with one goal. You can say, my favorite goal that I'm going to tackle is gender equality. So tell me how you get involved and what you can do.
Yeah. So the good news is there are many places now that you can go to, and you can start on the UN's global SDG site, Project Everyone's Global Goals site. They're very similar, and we sort of work together. Our Global Goals channels almost daily try and post something that helps people do when they say things like, what more can I do? I've seen this piece of content. I'm cross about this. This is not right. What more can I do? And I think on our Global Goals channels, you'll often find, whether it be on Goal 5, whether at the moment we have a campaign it is about Goal 5, but specifically about gender violence. Where can I go to take action? What can I do in my own life? What can I do to support an organization? So I think because there are so many actions you can take, each goal has its own set. If you go to globalgoals.org or the UN/SDG.org, you will find many ways of how you can take action. So I recommend that. I think we can do more. I think we can set it out clearer, but behind each goal, there are individual ways that you can do something in your home. You can change your behavior, or you can support an institution, or lobby your leader, to talk to your leaders, talk to your employers about what more can be done.
So, in fact, you can also listen to the Global Goals Cast, because we still tell the stories of the champions making the world a better place and helping to achieve the global goals, just to give the podcast a plug. Annemarie, let's come to you, and you can listen to Annemarie and Kate on our latest episode, which is just out. Annemarie, let's come to you.
So I often, this Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, often says that she finds a docking station. So within the goals, so something that you care about, something that you'd like to learn more about, and think of it as a door. And so maybe it's zero hunger. That's something it's tangible, something that many of us know about, and so you open that door and quickly you realize that to care about zero hunger means you also care about education, because like 300 children get their meal, potentially their only meal, at school. So now kids are not in school because of COVID. So what is that doing? I think it gets people really thinking about solutions. And that's what we really need, is getting those solutions and scaling them up so that they reach people. And there's so many ideas, and there's probably, most people are working on a goal, whether they realize it or not. And I think it's just identifying and recognizing it and being intentional about where you're going to either be a voice or do action or advocate for or amplify something that you really believe in. And it's really this journey. It's a short journey of 9 years now, coming up in 2021, this decade of action. And so I think every minute counts at this point. Really, really, truly, every minute and every action does count. And as Stuart was saying, you can see the difference that an individual can make and a group of individuals.
Thank you guys so much for joining us for this short session, the SDGs 101, what they are and what you can do, and how you can identify what you're already doing with a sustainable development goal. So thank you to Stuart, Kate, and Annemarie, and that is all from us.